I've been making D&D content for 3 years now, and I've never made a bard video. So it's time to make a bard video, and we're gonna start with Lore Bard. They get their magical secret early, which is the most fun feature in the whole game. Welcome to Pack Tactics. The first time I got magical secrets when I started D&D, I spent 4 hours looking at spells. I remember exactly what I picked. It was Spirit Guardians and Counterspell. Kobold, what is magical secrets? That's a level 6 feature, we'll get there eventually. Right off the bat, level 3, bonus proficiencies. You gain proficiency with 3 skills of your choice. I recommend getting Arcana for scribing scrolls so you have even more resources. If you want to know how that works, link in the description. Stealth is great for surprise or avoiding things, and I recommend Perception because that's the most rolled skill in the game. Seeing things is useful. Other than that, pick whatever you want. Next, Cutting Words. When a creature that you can see within 60 feet of you makes an attack roll, an ability check, or a damage roll, you can use your reaction to expend one of your uses of Bardic Inspiration. Roll a Bardic Inspiration die and subtract the number rolled from the creature's roll. You can choose to use this feature after the creature makes its roll, but before the DM determines whether the attack roll or ability check succeeds or fails, or before the creature deals its damage. The creature is immune if it can't hear you, or if it's immune to being charmed. Straight bards have a defense problem, and this helps with their defense, and of course it helps other people as well. Most of the time you'll be using this on attacks to get creatures to miss. If you have the shield spell from somewhere, then you'll rarely use this feature. Maybe you'll use it once in a while on your friends, or to make specific spells more annoying to the enemies, like Web, Entangle, Phantasmal Force, Telekinesis, and so on. Those are at least the common ones. Anyways, 60-foot range is pretty good. As for standouts, if there's a paladin or hexblade in your party, you should tell them to use Wrathful Smite. That with Cutting Words is insanely powerful, even potentially at late game. You see, if the creature fails the wisdom save, they're frightened, which means they can't willingly move closer to the source of its fear, and they have disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls. Here's the catch. In order for the creature to end the spell, they need to take an action to make a wisdom check, not a saving throw. So not only are they using an action to try to recover, they also have disadvantage on the check. And on top of that, you can use your Cutting Words to subtract the roll. This makes it almost impossible to break free, and this is just with a first level spell together with your feature. After the paladin does his shutdown, he can then move away. The creature makes an attack with disadvantage, hopefully they'll miss, and hopefully the paladin doesn't lose the concentration. And from there, all of you can just range the enemy down safely. Even if the enemy has ranged attacks and decide to shoot you instead of trying to recover, you guys are completely fine. They have disadvantage, and if there's easy cover, then it's even worse for them. Keep in mind, most enemies do more damage in melee than in range. If the paladin gets hit by the opportunity attack, use Cutting Words. If the creature succeeds on the check, use Cutting Words. Cutting Words is a very good feature and can be very powerful with teamwork. Keep that in mind. But you know what's better than Cutting Words? World Anvil, where you can create epic worlds full of fun adventures. This is a very powerful tool with great guides and a passionate community who are dedicated to storytelling. If you need help, there's tons of it. I've played in tons of games over the years, and in all of those games, all of the maps and lore and stuff are just shoved into a Google Doc. And they tend to be very messy. It's not visually appealing either. But World Anvil helps you organize all of that with appeal. Lore is easier to keep track of, be it a powerful person, country, particular war, god, and so on. You can also create maps that function like Google Maps. Interactions like this makes the world feel alive and so incredibly fun to explore, even off sessions. This is honestly my favorite feature World Anvil has. I highly recommend checking out World Anvil. Some of my DM friends use this, and they love it. One of them won an award from them recently. Anyways, use the code PACK at the checkout and you'll get a 51% off any yearly subscription. Back to the video. Now we get into the best part, additional magical secret at level 6. You learn 2 spells of your choice from any class. A spell you choose must be of a level you can cast, as shown on the Bard table, or a cantrip. The chosen spells count as Bard spells for you, but don't count against the number of Bard spells you know. You choose 2 spells from any class's spell list. This is one of the only features in the game with hundreds of options and combinations in a single feature. Do note that the feature states you can take the spells from any class's spell list. That means you can't pick Dunamancy spells like Gift of Alacrity or Dark Star, sadly, because those are only available for 2 subclasses. With hundreds of options to pick from, there's a lot of traps, so I'm going to talk about the very best options. If you want a ranked list that's very similar to this video, Tabletop Builds has you covered, link in the description. Do keep in mind that this is your character. If you want to grab something I don't mention in this video, then go ahead. These are just recommendations. Before we begin, I also have to mention multiclassing. Luckily for you, you are one of the charisma classes, and classes like that get a lot of dip potential like Divine Soul Sorcerer. That gives you access to Sorcerer and Cleric spell lists, so you can snag the best first level spells from those lists, like the ones that provide defenses, and of course, Bless. Another great one is Hexblade Warlock. That gives you medium armor and shield proficiency, and you get the shield spell. This is perfect because bards have a defense problem, and this solves it in a single dip. You also get Eldritch Blast, agonizing and repelling. True, well, you get agonizing and repelling if you take the 2nd level in Hexblade. Point is, there's a lot of goodies in that package. I highly recommend it. Now let's start with level 6 magical secrets from Lore Bard. First up, Absorb Elements. If you can't pick this up through multiclassing, then you might want to consider it here. I recommend thinking about it at level 10 rather than 6, because elemental damage becomes more common at those levels. Now, if you know for a fact you're going to be fighting a lot of dragons, for example in the dragon campaign, then do pick this up. I think that's kind of obvious, but you know, I'm just making sure. Next, Binding Ice. Fantastic 30-foot cone blast / shutdown spell. This combos super duper well with Web, which I also recommend, by the way. More on that later. The con save isn't that bad because of how powerful half on the save works. If you want to know more about the math around half on the save, link in the description. If you want a video on the spell itself, that's also there. Next, Conjure Animals. This is the strongest option at this level. Summon a creature, swarm enemies, tons of damage, hard to get rid of, tons of utility like even flight, tons of control. The only real negative about this spell is people really hate this spell, and usually it has to do with the speed. So I made a video on how to optimize Conjure Animals to make it really fast. If you manage to do this properly, then encounters will end quicker than normal because you do so much damage and control. Link in the description. If you can't pick Conjure Animals, Animate Dead is another option I recommend. You can get a Skeleton Archer, which is pretty good. It's not as good as the animals though. Counterspell, you should consider this at level 10. That's where casters get scary. By the way, Jack of all trades improves your counterspell, so that makes it more appealing than normal. If you want a guide on counterspell, link in the description. Next! Fireball goes kaboom! Bards lack good blasting spells, and this is a fantastic blast spell. Very simple. Next, Fly. Not only is it great utility, it's got 60-foot speed, lasts 10 minutes, and upcast targets more of your friends. That's really good. It can also potentially counter more than half of all the creatures in all of the books combined because they don't have range. You fly up and shoot down. This can potentially default kill them too. Very simple. Next, Pass Without Trace. One of the best spells in the entire game. It's used for group surprise, which is basically like Action Surge but for your whole party. This spell demolishes dungeons. If there's another party member with this spell, don't pick it. Phantom Steed, it's a ritual cast for a mount that lasts for an hour. It can move 100 feet, 200 feet if dash. It can disengage for you without using any of your actions. You can ritual cast many of them for your party while riding the horse. It's a fantastic spell. Link in the description for more details. Shield. Like Absorb Elements, if you can't dip for it, then consider picking this up. But unlike Absorb Elements, you should think about getting this as soon as possible. You have a serious defense problem as a bard, and this spell goes a long way to help you. Sleet Storm. 40-foot radius cylinder that cripples flying, melee, and spellcasting monsters. This AoE is massive. Look how big it is. Fantastic control. I really should make a video about it. It's really underrated. Spike Growth, 20-foot radius AoE that causes difficult terrain and does 2d4 piercing damage for every 5-foot creature's travel. This is neck and neck with Web. If your party likes pushing people around like a warlock with repelling, then I highly recommend using this spell. Link in the description for more details. Spirit Guardians, all you have to do is dodge, and maybe cast some cantrips once in a while. This is the easiest and most chill option next to Fireball, and this spell lasts for a very long time, 10 minutes. Before picking this up, I recommend securing your defenses first, because this is a close to melee range AoE spell. So that means you're going to be attacked a lot. If you want an ultimate guide, link in the description. Last one, Web, creates a 20-foot cube of difficult terrain that forces creatures to make a dexterity saving throw, or become restrained until they use an action and succeed on a strength check. Very few creatures in the game are immune to restraint condition, and there's difficult terrain on top of that. Like I said before, it's neck and neck with Spike Growth, but unlike Spike Growth, you can anchor it onto things like walls. Vampire spawns, for example, can't just walk on the wall to ignore your web, like they can with Spike Growth. You can even get flying enemies out of the sky with this. But usually this is used for hallways, and together with Binding Ice, it's a perfect combo. Web alone shuts down a lot of people dead in their tracks. Then from there you range them out. That's all my recommendations. Now we're moving on to Capstone, Peerless Skill. Starting at 14th level, when you make an ability check, you can expend one use of your Bardic Inspiration. Roll a Bardic Inspiration die and add the number rolled to your ability check. You can choose to do so after you roll the die for the ability check, but before the DM tells you whether you succeed or fail. Your Bardic Inspiration die is a D10 at this level. Next level, it increases to a D12. This, together with Jack of all trades and Counterspell, makes you the best counterspeller in the game, which is actually quite fitting because at these levels, that's when counterspell wars usually happen. So I would say this is a fitting capstone. Well, unless you don't have counterspell, but yeah. Lore Bard has a special place in my heart. This was my first full caster I ever played in 5e. I played this subclass for like a year, and I still remember him to this day. Here he is. Doesn't he look familiar? Oh my god, Kobold, that's you! Yeah, that's the first version of me before I became a YouTuber. I was an ugly Kobold back then. I looked like a Kobold Reddit moderator back then. So Kobold, you're a Lore Bard! No, in this multiverse, or well, the YouTube version of me, I'm a war mage, which I plan on covering eventually. Anyways, end of video.